Hi there, Wendy Green here, part 3 of our little lecture on continuing the contemplation journey and what that actually means. And I know perhaps it's not a complete covering title, but let us run with it. So basically what I'm doing here is what we call comparative spirituality, of course, within my frame of reference and how I understand what it means to make comparative spirituality. It's like a method that we can work with where we allude to the scientific mythology that kind of goes with understanding the text within the material we're dealing with within their own context, within who was it written for, when was it written, what were the cultural setting when it was written, what were the trends in society when it was written, and what's the purpose of the goal of this material. So as you know from the Future Human Project course 1, where I talk about that each faction are there working with their material, we are now going base program. And I was saying, yes, each faction, there is this Syrian Pleiadian, Syrian version parts of the planetary hierarchy that are behind the Bailey teachings, but at the same time they are also they had this purpose and this goal of what they wanted to achieve with humanity that goes under what we understand as the Old World Order. And those of you out there that are doing what we could I posted a lecture on my Facebook page kind of talking about string theory as if we were going to share it at a cocktail party. And I think there are this kind of cocktail spirituality out there where people are just barely dipping their toes into what it is. And of course, whatever I share out there for those of us who are doing this as in a scientific way. So when we do comparative spirituality, we must also take on to ourselves that this is a way of life. This is as if we were professionals attending universities that were dealing with development of spirituality, development of the human soul integrating into the physicality, and what kind of schools would we be dealing with this. And this is where you are to see at my whole academy. I'm not doing cocktail spirituality. For me, this I am constantly in the deep end, which I will allude to in different levels of my life. What I am teaching you here has nothing to do with pure theory, but I'm applying my practicality and what I've experienced to certain levels of theories from where we can do this complexity and comparativeness of the different approaches to what spirituality is, because we are all on a quest, and at the end of the day it's not about finding the answers and the correct answers, which alludes to what is the truth, but the journey of discovering who and what we are in our process with working with the different elements of what it means to be human. And at the end of the day, the goal of that one should be to build up a personality structure that will be able and capable of handling the enormously strong energies that comes from the other worlds and the other dimensions we are part of. And at the same time avoiding to spark to life what is imbued in the matter level already, and the 3 lower fields of which are residual energies of previous failed systems. We must never overlook that every single atom in our body and our emotional field and our mental field are composed out of energies from humanities and civilizations on our planet and in our solar system and in our quadrant that completely failed what they were supposed to achieve. Because if they have nailed it, we would not be in this jam that we are in. And this is not about blaming it all on the ancestors and saying, well, they fucked up and therefore I'm in a fucked up situation, but understanding the circumstances into which we are doing this. So as with all developmental journeys, it's not about reaching the goal, it's about enjoying the process. It's about figuring out, making a process that makes sense to us. And in that, finding the different answers and understanding that spirituality is not something you use at a cocktail party and talk about astrology and, oh, that's exciting, and whatever's going on out there, or writing, oh, I love you and my friend and I miss you, and whatever's going on the Instagram and on Facebook and all of these, oh, my beloved, oh, my friend, friend, or love to you and peace be with you, and whatever all of you guys are writing out there, which in itself, of course, is nice. It's better than all of the other opposition of it that also is literally flowing over on the different social media. But this is not my stand from wherever I'm doing. It never was and never will be. For me, this is as important as breathing, not in a dedicated 6-ray perverted way where I'm fanatic about it, but as a way of living. So this is who I am. This is me. As if I'm also a psychotherapist. I'm also a bachelor of theology. I'm also this certified human resource woman. I have also worked with these kind of things within business structures that were part of me earlier in who I used to be. I also worked as a healer, and I've been a mom, and I've been a wife, and I've been a girlfriend, and I've been a good friend, and all of these different facets and stages of our life where we work through that are part of our what we call the self-identification process. But as it also comes to the end of it, as most of you that have had some kind of a higher level experience, whether it was artificially induced or you achieved it by contemplation and meditation, which of course is the right way, because this similar to get drunk or do DMT or ayahuasca or whatever, you're just getting 15 minutes of some other sort of experience, and how many of you are actually able to integrate the information you get. And what does it mean? Because you don't have any context other than this is recreational or that was fun or whatever, which is a complete lack of understanding of what you're actually dealing with. Because the whole journey of this one is not to get high, or this is fucking funny, or doing acid or whatever you call it out there as a part of this is my right recreational way of living kind of thing. And it's a serious, it's actually a very, very serious project. And that's why I was always organized within rituals. It was something for the few. It was not something that you were just doing out there. And you also need to ask yourself, why has that been pushed out there as something that is available for everyone? Is that part of actually an activation process, or is it the opposite? Because when you just breach through the different veils that are technically etheric fields, or seals within the etheric fields that are preventing you from blasting into these other dimensions or other parts of our reality, which many of you are not acquainted with yet, you are like children in these realities. And you might think, oh, I'm just working with symbols or whatever you're seeing, all depending on where you have your main polarization, as it's called. If you are polarized or have an astral soul, you will be on the astral plane. Whatever you will experience in DMT will be patches into that one right away, and opening the door in there means that you will not be able to shut it down again. And that means a lot of stuff will come in because you have artificially breached through one of the seals, and you have got access to information that was not yours to get access to right away. Because if you had done it in meditation and energy work and self-clearing work and psychological build-up structures, similar as if you were training for the black belt in jiu-jitsu, you would have this whole context with you. You would have the whole hierarchy or the order of things. You would know your place in that hierarchy or order of things. You would have learned to respect the ones that have gone before you, have achieved the different grades of the belt. I'm not doing jiu-jitsu, I'm just using that as an example. You would have a profound respect for what you're dealing with. You would know this can cause harm and this does not cause harm. This is for self-defense. This is for some kind of whatever circumstance you're in. You will have the correct behavior, which is what the whole hierarchy of the different belt and how to achieve these degrees are built up within martial arts, similar as in Freemason or whatever you're dealing with. And today there is a huge access of everything. So if you if you are mental polarized and you're too much up in your head, so to speak, whenever you go, wherever you do with that one, you might see weird abstract symbols or geometrical forms or whatever, which is also a distortion plane, which is interesting enough because we have, Einstein was very focused on geometrical, geometry figures, and Pythagoras was there, and Plato was there, and that was part of their teaching system. And these are some of the thought forms they have created. So technically, if you are doing this and you see this square or this circle, or you're seeing the square within the circle, or you're seeing some kind of symbolic representation which you can do mathematics of, which we know Pythagoras was both an outer school, but it was also an inner school of mystery, using mathematical equations and the different geometrical figures to signify divine ordered system within our reality, working with the mathematics and working with the geometrical forms, a way of building in the divine architecture into our reality. We must not forget that was the esoteric version of the mathematical system that Pythagoras were teaching in. Well, then that would be what you would encounter if you do DMT, and you might have been working in that way previously. That's the first layer of the mental field that goes beyond the normal human brain, and where you breach through the first seal of the etheric field into what we technically could say the first real level of what the mental field is about, and not just your brain processes. So this is what this 15 minutes does. It breaches you into the first layer of what is behind your physical reality. And if you don't know that there's more on this journey, if you don't know that this is actually part of something that's much, much bigger, and you're not interested in actually using that for something, personally, I don't think you should do this kind of thing. Similar, there are certain things you can experiment with, and there are certain things you should not experiment with. And I know this is the traditional old world order. And if you ask me, well, Randy, how did you do it? Did you do it by the book? And I did never use artificial methods in this, but the Bailey material strongly emphasizes that you should not work directly on the chakras. You should work around the chakras, unless you're doing healing, but that's a whole other idea. But if you're doing the contemplation work and the clearing of your emotional field and the building of a personality structure that is mature enough to understand all of these subtleties and nuances in what it means to work with energy, and why it's important to follow the laws and the rules, what that applies to, and what the goal and purpose of this quote-unquote spiritual work is. Because it's not about, oh, fuck, I saw some kind of entity or whatever, and the whole understanding of what are these entities, and look behind their cloaking, and really, really understanding within a context that is not completely distorted or completed within whatever false belief system or artificial programs that have been created out there to derail us on our journey, but beginning to work through these different layers, of which I go in and talk about the prohibiting technologies and the different distortion fields that are part of the astral plane, where they're actually linked up different entities that can possess you, and all of this nasty piece of that business of regaining your full consciousness structure and working the way through the cosmic evil that are imbued in your physical, emotional, and mental layers, which are seeded full of all sorts of weird stuff that if you don't have this training and this ability to work with it in its correct context and its correct understanding, and asking the right questions, and stand strong in your own energy while you're doing it, the chances of you seriously becoming ill and seriously being overtaken by these levels of reality are quite extensive. And I'm looking in hindsight, you can say quite a lot of stuff I have experienced is because I went on too strong. I went on head in. That's my thing. I go in headstrong, thinking I can deal with this, and then while in the middle of it, I typically have a tendency to think, fuck, a little bit in over my head here. But then the strength comes up in me, and then I say, okay, I put myself there. Let me get myself out of the mess I put myself in, and I take responsibility for what I've done. And then I begin figuring out, okay, how do I get out of here? What do I need to do to get out of here? Where am I? How do I make a strategy to get myself out of this mess? So I kind of, being the fool, the tarot card, the fool, I plunged myself into whatever. And then when I'm in the middle of it, I know, okay, now I'm here. And now I know what I'm actually dealing with. And here, then I begin the fight and the life fight to figure out a way to get out, but get out in a way where I can look upon myself with some degree of honor and self-respect, and in a way where I can come out when I do the evaluation of my journey and what I put myself up to, I can say, yes, I did it in the way I can be proud of, because I might have made a lot of mistakes in the journey. Oh my God, the numbers of mistakes, right? But they have all been turned into something productive. I have used the fourth ray, the crisis of polarities, of being right and wrong, of doing errors and turning them into the opposition. That has all been about transmuting energy. I have transformed enormous amount of energy in that work, and it takes the right use of dedication. So you have the will to continue and the will to proceed to its correct end, where you know what the purpose and the goal of what you're doing is. Because in my life, nothing should just do randomly or because it's fun or whatever. That's leisure time. That's fine. But living is a serious business for me. Living is about achieving a specific goal. It's about the externalization of the soul kingdom within our reality. So with that understanding, using the sixth ray in a dedicated way that is not fanatic, and using the fourth ray in a way that develops who and what I am to a more complex and broader type of personality that is more containing and accepting and understanding the responsibility for myself and my surroundings, because being plunged into all of these levels have taught me a lot about the other races that are part in this world and beyond, and who is here and who is not here, and then turning that into my version of love and wisdom, which is and can be compassionate, but for most of the time it's about meeting whoever you're dealing with on the exact level they are, and understanding to the dot who and what they are and what their purpose and function is, and you respond in the correct manner. That's part of the rules of engagement. You enter in with what you could call diplomatic wisdom in whatever situation you're in, so you will always reach that level that does not lead to a confrontation or a war. It doesn't mean that it doesn't lead to a crisis or a conflict, but there's a huge gap between a conflict and a war. And when we're dealing with all of the other races of our system that are part of the previous solar system in the third cycle, they were warrior races. They turned into warrior races, all of them, or technologically driven warrior races. This is why we have all of these visions of AI and whatever's going on. That's from the previous solar system, where things went really, really, really wrong. And that is the heritage. That is the cosmic evil that is in us. That is what we constantly are fighting. Not necessarily the AI, but that tendency in our matter, in our structures, that kind of goes with that urge to do something that does not fit this system, that does not fit this reality we're part of. You can say in the previous solar system, that could be seen as the cosmic good, to be this warrior race, to claim territory, to fight down borders and expand universes and travel beyond your own quadrant and claim new jurisdictions and plant your flag here and there and take over weird universes and create new technologies to uphold these new weird spaces and spaces and whatever you were dealing with. And then the unfortunate side effect of it, because it's also a polarity system, well, then what are the consequences of this claiming jurisdiction, of this taking over territories, and this developing different forms of entities and races that are ranging from quadrupedal into that is horizontal, into bipedal that are vertical, and how did they begin to work together, and what does that lead to, and who's better, who's worse, and all of these underdeveloped psychological skills that led to the wars. And with that understanding, you also understand that we are on one level, as on the molecular level that is tied to the previous solar system. We are fighting the matter not in a way that it's sinful and whatever, but it has its cosmic tendencies that are part of a previous solar system that are what you could call aggressive and oriented in a specific way. And then we had from Lemuria, which were the first races that were trying, if you can do with the Bailey material, here added in with a little bit. She does not talk about the cosmic wars, that's my memories, but she always talks about the cosmic evil, and I just expanded in to explain to you that that's what were there, the races that were there, because I remember being there. So this is my memories that are being put in there. But if we do with her version of the Lemurian race, which are not my version of the projects I was part of in Lemuria, but the projects that group of Syrian A, White Brotherhood, whatever version they had there, their choice of humans were the first step were to really to master the third cycle or the previous solar system matter, and then building in the etheric field of the new code systems. That was what that was about. And that ended quite unfortunate and led to what we could call the creation of sexuality. And then you had the Atlantean project, where it was all about the emotional field, the next step of the energies that was supposed to build into what we call buddhi, or this love and wisdom type of consciousness structure, that is a vibration that forces the consciousness units to work in a specific way. And this is what the astral plane was supposed to be in the Atlantean race, again going with the Bailey material, that they were to learn to work with emotions, to create a personality structure that were emotional, that could have this loving, kind, caring feeling of responsibility for self and others, the understanding of otherhood, the understanding of selfhood, and how these were to work together. And that is what I call the 2-8 pillar, how they were to work together as races, but not as in opposition, but as a joint force working for the same goal, as a team, the team consciousness, as an individual within a team. And if you go with the Bailey material, that failed tremendously. So that did not, even though quite a lot of them succeeded and went into the planetary hierarchy, the ones that were left behind, that's the fall of Atlantis, remember? And the councils literally had to take out Atlantis in various forms. That's how bad it went, including some of the Lemurian souls. But the Lemurian body types and the Atlantean soul types are still amongst us. And these are some of the issues we're dealing with. The Lemurian body type is preferably used by the insectoid races that have come from other systems, whereas the ones that are more fond with the Atlantean type of, which easily goes into magic and all sorts of stuff, have been the ones that have been targeted for the military projects, because they were very, very dedicated, and they were very, very easily swayed in a specific direction for their quest and search for the higher order awareness. And in the not awareness, but actually just the ability to work with energy, as it with astralism, which is what you predominantly see within people who are doing New Age stuff. They want the powers and the forces, but they don't really want to work with the energies. This is important to understand as well. And then you can say in this group at this time that we're in, it's now about developing the mental field, which were not very strong during Atlantis. It was there, but it was not strong. And this is what has been worked on ever since, first picking up on the different races after Atlantis, which were at the beginning of our civilization, with both Lemurian souls and Atlantean souls, and then the ones that were to carry the burden of developing what they call the Aryan soul, which I don't really agree with, because it has a lot of unfortunate connotations, and it's in the book as well. And it's very unfortunate because, the guy that showed the perverted side of it, and he was the predominant figure from Aldebaran that were taking over during the Second World War. So that's unfortunate. And we also have a lot of scientists that were brewed out of that kind of, also within the esoteric communities that work with this Aryan prototype kind of thing, which is, if you ask my opinion, are what you're seeing in the depictions of the Ascended Masters. That is the perfect Aryan. That is what the Nazis wanted to create. That's what eugenics is all about, just to put it in another perspective that's a little bit provocative. Not necessarily correctly true, but provocative enough. What is that ideal that is portrayed in the Masters? Just be a little bit critical about what you're actually seeing, and where does it come from, and what time period were they created, and what are they the expression of. But I will go with the whole development of the mental field, and I'm not their version of Lemuria and their version of Atlantis and where we are now are not my story. But I just put it in here so you have it in context when, and if you do choose to read the Bailey material, you will have that as a background and the context and understanding of it. So what was the goal with this quote unquote Aryan civilization that was supposed to work within a new age, that was supposed to teach the sciences about building the Antakarana and learning to work consciously with the silver thread or the sutratma, and were to develop the true chakra system that would allow for humans to clear out the Lemurian mistakes through the processes of sexuality and physicality for the highest purity rate, that will clear out astralism and distortion by working through the Atlantean layers of the astral plane to travel up to higher awareness, where the different code systems would transform these two unfortunate levels of our current civilization or solar system, and then lead into the who and what we are today, and what is needed to develop into what we could call a true soul integrated race, which the Aryan race is the one that should lead to the pentagrams, that should lead to that one, where the cubes or the quadrupedals from the fourth cycle will develop into the fifth cycle, and the pentagrams from where this opposition between the reversed and the upright will merge together and become the hexagram, which is the beginning point, or the sixth dimension, which is the beginning point of the next solar system that will come after, having undone the mistakes of the previous solar system, including the infant mistakes that were done while our solar system was its infancy, quote unquote, with the civilization that were built in here, trying to undo the mistakes of the previous solar system, which you can ask, was it this solar system? No, it did not look the way our solar system looks today. It was rearranged for the purpose. And this is where I go in with the Pillar Project and my perspective of things. But this is not me putting out my perspective of things, because that's in my classes, and if you want to do that one, you do it in my classes. But here I'm doing what we could say, well, that's for the common good. That's what was put out there. And do I feel it as my job to take this up and explain all of these kind of things? No, I'm just explaining it because that is what led me to my version of my teaching system, and what my memories and what I observed and learned by working with this material, as well as the questions I ask as an inspiration for you to find an approach that resonates with who and what you are, understanding that these differences in who and what we are predispositioning us in a specific way to work in a specific way. So with that one, again, repeating what I already said in the first two videos, I wanted to put in there so we can move on until the next level. This is a teaching method. You are saying something in one context, then you are moving into a specific higher level where you reach a peak, then you go back and repeat the same thing in another context, then you reach a peak with that one, then you go back and say the same thing in a third context, and then you reach a peak with that one. And what you should take out of this method of education is that you are to reach the peaks. And these peaks are hopefully because they have a solid foundation in a general understanding on different levels and ways of perceiving the matter, will give a context or a pattern from where you will actually create some sort of understanding. And the goal is the understanding, because it's about understanding yourself, it's about understanding reality, it's about understanding your history. And from that one, you should build your personal version of why you think it's important for you to take this responsibility and work with yourself in a way that will allow these different aspects of your being to be integrated into this physical form, so that you can do the transition. So the point of the education in a new age was all about that they foresaw that in this century, we would, that if you go with the 150-year period that Tibetan is talking about, that would be the first 50 years. That would be a change in cultural settings as well as in how we structure our society. And we can say in many ways we have definitely developed us on many levels and on a broad scale compared to where people were then and compared to where people are now. Certain things have moved forward, other things have flunked and failed and become even worse and more primitive. If we, for instance, take the behavior that people are showing on social media, that was unthinkable, not just as much to social media, but talking to each other with that lack of respect. And at the same time, also the opposite, this whole kind of I love you movement, which has also come out, these polarities, from where we hopefully at some point, using the fourth ray, will know when to say what and how to say what and in what environment to say what, and in a way that is harmless, as in it can be constructive, but it must be constructive in a way that leads to the most optimal outcome for all involved, so to speak, and taking responsibility for that group behavior. So we can hope that this is what the internet and the social media will be part of, including the whole being able to access all levels of information using technology, unfortunately. But technically, once you reach the expansion and the development of the third mental field, you will be able to expand your perception field of your mind into different levels of our reality and tap into thought forms, as well as different programs from where you can derive the information the same way you're doing on the internet. So it is in a way being implemented, but it's not being implemented from the level of consciousness development, as in literally doing the energy work that is needed. It is being implemented via technology. And this is where you can say the technocrats have hijacked the idea of the continuation of humanity. And that's where I see issues with that might lead to some unfortunate transhuman future. And if you ask me why I also think that is an actual threat, which we all know, but let me give a little bit of explanation, is again, if you go with the Bailey material and the upcoming age of Aquarius, that will not hit us until late in the 22nd century. But we're already beginning, because nothing is created out in a vacuum or on the day. It is a long process. Then in the 80s, the age of Aquarius, what it meant was unity and brotherhood, and everybody doing as the Bailey material talks about, everybody's working with the soul and about integrating the soul and the externalization of the hierarchy, and everybody will be soul infused. It's about the maturing of humanity. It's about maturing humanity to be able to take the responsibility and use the forces, the logical forces of Aquarius, to change one level of energy into another, understanding the laws of transformation and transmutation and responsibility and inclusivity, which is the buzzwords of what the Christ consciousness is actually about. And that is what was talked to us about in the ages. That was the age of Aquarius. If I look up today what the age of Aquarius is about, it's all about transhumanism and integration of technologies and all of these kind of things, which, yes, is definitely here. But that is not what was the idea of the age of Aquarius. So you can see how things are easily hijacked, and you look it up on the internet and you think, oh, that's how it's always been. No, this is where you need to remember. That's why I need to compare. And I know many of you might not be able to find this material out there on the internet, but they're definitely in the old books. And this is where it's a good thing also to do a little bit of a historical search, and not just on the internet, but also in books. Because we do know how easily things get changed on the internet, right? It's presenting itself to be the level of information, but it's something new, and it's adapted and is run through different alteration systems, making it something very, very dissimilar to what it was originally. So that was what we're supposed to do in these 100 years, preparing for the age of Aquarius. Inclusivity, a mature personality, responsibility for unity and for the whole as an individual in a team setting, the goal to work towards a high level of awareness, the joint forces to create schools where this would be taught as an everyday part of life, parenting that would work with the children's karma and work with the energy fields the child had, using either astrology, which Bailey or the Tibetan also says, well, whatever's out there now is not much worth much, so that cannot be used. But there are certain ideas behind astrology which I also tap into from time to time. There are things that can be used for that. Especially when we talk about when is a child supposed to be born, what stars will it come under, what kind of influences on not personally ways, but from the planets around us and the constellations around us, because they are opening and closing up gates that allow certain souls to come into incarnation. These are part of specific type of races and programs. So that matters. It matters in which month your child is born, and it will matter more into the future, because the externalization of the hierarchy, which is composed of many different races from this solar system as well as beyond, will begin their journey into our society. So with that understanding, we are far from that. That's what the education in a New Age is about. I suggest you read the book. It's a quick read. It's only 200 pages or something. So it's a little quick book. And it gives a lot of good inspiration. I'm not saying, oh, this is what we need to go on and embark on or whatever, but we ought to get inspired by it. And if you ask me, do I see that we within the next 100 years will create schools where children are taught the sciences of the Antakarana? Well, I would say if they are, they're definitely not going to use the old Hindu word, Antakarana. They are not going to do the Hindu terminology unless we make a unified civilization that are understanding in depth the different languages and the meaning of the different words within the context of the different languages and the thought systems that are behind that language, which is for me kind of, I don't like this whole eclectic, you're taking one word from Hindu teachings and then you put it into a Western teaching system. I think it's more appropriate to develop new words that are in alignment with the teaching system and the thought forms you're building, which is what I'm doing in my book, Souls of Humanity, and constantly are doing. That's why I don't call it the soul, but call it the template. That's why I don't call it the etheric field, but the code sheets, because they are code sheets. They're part of holographic technology. But I also appreciate and understand why they chose to do this 100 years ago, because it was 100 years ago. And where was society at that time? They had not got into the computer age. They had not understand the understanding of binary code systems and quantum fields the way we have today. It was on the beginning. Just seeing when Einstein talks about, we had the priest, actually I saw in that talk, I posted on my Facebook page, I can't remember, a cocktail party on string theory or something. There is this depiction of Einstein that is showing the Big Bang, which is actually an idea he took from someone else, and he's showing it as the singularity, which then expands into a cone shape. And I'm a little bit kind of, that just makes absolutely no sense to me. First and foremost, the whole Big Bang, and there was no time before that, and we just exploded out of nothingness. That is for me a little bit too much into the Old Testament in the beginning story, right? This is Genesis all over within the scientific community, even though they are saying we're trying to work out of the Bible stories, they are still using the same concepts. So again, with this whole, it would have been a good thing is Einstein has sat down and meditated and think, I wonder why the whole Big Bang theory, the idea of that one actually came from a priest. Was that the Vatican's attempt to try and upgrade the information system or whatever? And what does it actually mean that there is a Big Bang? Shouldn't it be spherical all around the singularity and not into a cone shape? Or these kind of things. Again, I'm just saying these are some of the things, again, we should also ask ourselves the questions. If there were a Big Bang, first and foremost, there was a Big Bang. That's the timeline event. But was it out of nowhere? Absolutely not. That is what led to that's part of some of the unfortunate events that happened. Actually, not in the previous solar system, but in this solar system, in the beginning of this solar system, in the beginning of this version of the universes, where there was experimenting using the energies of the previous solar system. And that led to the Big Bang. And that led to a huge blast that expanded all around, equally around you, and not in a cone shape. So that is, for me, that's a complete wrong depiction of the Big Bang. When you do the Big Bang and then you develop it into a cone shape that expands. Yes, it expands, but it expands in all directions. In all directions, past, present, and future. And we have that when we work with the electrons. We can go back and forth in time with them. When we do the quantum science, we technically go back in time. We go to the finer and finer fields of previous existences or older layers of our current existences. You're literally working your way back in time. And when you are working the other direction with the expansion, you're working your way into the future. And what is a set of limitations there, where the different forces play in and define that future, what is possible and what's not possible, because nothing is infinite. It goes into infinity. Protons have a specific a level of existence before they begin to wear out and decay and cease to exist. Everything has a limitation to it. So an expansion must naturally have a limitation to it as well. That is the influential sphere, or the spherical limitations from where there can be no further expansion in that type of energy. So everything has a limitation to it, from where once it reaches that perimeter, it will begin to collapse. These are natural laws that goes with the more you expand it, the more you use the energies that are there, the more force you will create, the more distortion you will create, or quote unquote entropy. And the more entropy there is, the more there will be more solidified. That will hold lesser and lesser viable forms of energy. That will be more and more solidified. That will become denser and denser. That is technically what entropy is. And then it becomes this huge, excuse my expression, dead whale in the boat that will make it sink. That will make it draw it under from one end and down under until the rest of the ship goes under. These are natural dynamics, unless, of course, you free the whale before it dies, and leave it into the ocean, and you maintain your ship, and you maintain what you're part of to avoid entropy or distortion from being created. So that is some of the things you can say, well, that is not 100% put into the Bailey material, but these are some of the things we are up against now. These are some of the things that if we are to say, okay, can we reach the age of Aquarius dream utopia that has been put and prophesized for us as things are now, with the Greys taking over and creating this artificial holographic construction that were inserted into the original solar system construction in 2011? No, we probably have to go a little bit differently around these kind of things. So again, this is where the understanding of when things were written, in what context, where are we now, and how can we use this mythology to get to the point where we will still achieve the goal of getting as many as possible to do the transition. Thank you.